When I'm rich, I'll pay you back. A desperate promise from a boy with nothing. 20 years later, Benjamin Ashford returned to that forgotten town as a millionaire, but some debts can't be paid with money, and some secrets refuse to stay buried. The luxury sedan kicked up a cloud of red dust as it turned onto the unpaved road that Benjamin hadn't seen in 2 decades. In the back seat, his hands began to sweat exactly like they had when he was that starving 12-year-old boy who had fled this place with nothing but the clothes on his back and a dream that seemed impossible. "Sir, are you sure this is right?" the driver asked, eyeing the desolate landscape. "This place looks abandoned." "This is it," Benjamin replied, his voice steady even as his heart crumbled inside. "Keep going." Every bump in the road brought back a memory he had tried to bury for years. There at that bend, he used to search for wild berries to trick his empty stomach. And on top of the hill, he could still see the remains of Harrison Drummond's estate, the man who had destroyed his family's life. $47. That was the amount of the debt Benjamin had carried in his chest for 20 years. To anyone else, it was nothing, barely enough to buy groceries for a week, but to a boy who didn't even have food to eat, those $47 represented the difference between life and death. And they represented Evelyn Sunderland, Evie, as everyone called her. The woman the whole town thought was crazy for helping a street kid that nobody wanted around. The woman who shared what little she had, who gave food when he was dying of hunger, who gave shelter when he slept under bridges, who gave hope when the entire world had turned its back on him. The woman who, when he said he was leaving to try his luck in the big city, placed $47 in his hand and said, "Go, son, go and don't look back. One day you'll return. I know you will." And Benjamin had promised, with tears streaming down the face of that skinny, frightened boy, "I'll pay this debt, Miss Evie. I'll pay you back when I'm rich." She laughed, a sweet laugh, without malice, from someone who didn't believe in wealth, but believed in him. "You don't need to pay anything back, child. You just need to be happy." But Benjamin never forgot. For 20 years, that debt burned in his chest like a living ember. On the hardest days, when he slept on the streets, when he went hungry, when he worked from sunrise to sunset for scraps, it was the memory of those $47 that made him get up. It was the promise he had made that kept him from giving up. And now he was returning, a millionaire, owner of one of the largest construction companies in the country, returning to pay a debt that had no price. The car entered the town of Willowbrook, and Benjamin felt his heart tighten. The place was even poorer than he remembered. The wooden houses had deep cracks in their walls, the roofs were patched with plastic tarps, and the dirt streets looked like they hadn't seen maintenance in years. Barefoot children played in the dust, exactly as he had played when he was their age. "You can stop here," Benjamin said when they reached the central square. Before he even stepped out, he could feel the stares. A car like this in Willowbrook was like a spaceship landing in the middle of nowhere. People stopped what they were doing to watch, whispering among themselves, trying to guess who this stranger arriving with such luxury in this forgotten corner could be. Benjamin stepped out of the car and adjusted his jacket. It wasn't vanity, it was armor. Every thread of that suit represented a battle won, a sleepless night, a door that slammed in his face until he insisted enough to open it. "Good Lord above," a woman's voice came from somewhere. "Folks, look at those eyes. That's Benjamin, the Sunderland boy." The name spread like wildfire through the silent square. "Benjamin? The one who ran away? Ain't be, that kid had nothing to his name." "It's him all right. Look at his face, same face." "Jesus have mercy, he came back rich." A small crowd formed around the car, keeping a respectful distance, but with eyes wide in astonishment. Benjamin recognized some faces aged by time. Mrs. Patterson, who sold vegetables at the market, old Mr. Tibbs, who fixed bicycles. Faces he had never forgotten. And then a voice cut through the murmuring, a voice that made Benjamin's blood freeze in his veins. "Well, well, well, look who decided to show up." The crowd parted in silence, and from it emerged a figure Benjamin had never forgotten. Harrison Drummond, older, more hunched, leaning on a dark wooden cane, but with the same look of contempt he'd had 20 years ago. "The ungrateful wretch returned," Drummond spat the words with disgust, "and from the looks of it learned to steal real good, because that's the only way a nobody like this shows up with a car like that." Benjamin felt rage rise in his throat, but he breathed deep. He hadn't come for this. He wasn't going to give the old man that satisfaction. "Mr. Drummond," he said with a calm that surprised even himself. "You're still the same as always. Good to know some things never change. What do you want here, boy? Came for revenge. Came to show off that you moved up in the world. I didn't come because of you. You're not worth my time." The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Nobody had ever spoken to Drummond like that. Even in decline, even without the power he once had, he was still feared in Willowbrook. The old man's eyes narrowed with hatred. I know why you came. Came looking for that crazy old woman who raised you, didn't you? Evie." Benjamin took a step toward Drummond, and his voice came out low, controlled. "Don't talk about her like that." "Or what? You gonna hit me?" "Where does she live?" Drummond let out a cruel laugh that echoed through the silent square. "You don't know? Oh, how wonderful. The prodigal son doesn't know." The old man approached, leaning on his cane, and there was a sickening pleasure in his eyes. "Your precious Miss Evie is dying, boy, sick for months, and you know what's better? She lost everything. Her little house, her little plot of land, everything. Guess who got it?" Benjamin felt the world spin around him. "What did you do?" "Me? Nothing much. Just collected an old debt. With interest, of course. She couldn't pay, so the law did its job." "You took the house from a sick elderly woman?" "I took what was mine by right. She owed, she didn't pay. Simple as that." Benjamin advanced, and for a second it looked like he was going to grab Drummond by the collar. His fists were clenched, his jaw locked, and there was fire in his eyes. But he stopped, because destroying that miserable old man wasn't going to bring Miss Evie's house back. "Where is she?" "In a shack behind her granddaughter's property. Her daughter Helena died some years back, left a girl behind. Hazel. She and the old woman getting by however they can in that hole." "Helena." The name hit Benjamin like a punch to the stomach. Helena, Miss Evie's daughter. The older girl who always protected him when the other boys wanted to beat him up. The one who shared her lunch, who taught him to read, who treated him like a brother. Helena had died, and she had left a daughter behind. Benjamin turned without saying another word and began to walk. The crowd parted in silence, and he could hear the whispers. Drummond went too far this time. Poor Evie, she didn't deserve this. He walked through the dirt streets he knew by heart. There, on that corner, Miss Evie found him passed out from hunger. There, under that tree, she would sit with him on hot afternoons and tell stories. There she hung the clothes she washed, the only work she had to support herself and her daughter. And now, because of a cruel man and an unjust debt, she had lost everything. Benjamin reached the end of a dead-end road and saw the shack. It was worse than he had imagined. Old wood, holes covered with cardboard, a rusty tin roof, a door that looked ready to fall off. In front, a young woman with brown hair tied in a bun was washing clothes in an improvised tub. She looked up when she heard footsteps, and her expression went from curiosity to distrust. "Who are you? If you came to collect something, you can leave. We don't owe anyone anything." "Are you Hazel?" The young woman narrowed her eyes. "Who wants to know?" "My name is Benjamin. Benjamin Ashford." The bucket Hazel was holding fell to the ground with a crash. Water spread across the dirt, but she didn't seem to notice. Her eyes were fixed on him. "Benjamin? The Benjamin my grandmother waited for her whole life. The Benjamin who promised to come back and disappeared for 20 years? The Benjamin my mother cried over until her last day, wondering if you were okay." Every word was a dagger in his chest. "I came to pay a debt." Hazel let out a bitter laugh that didn't match her young face. "Debt? You think money fixes what you did? You think your fancy clothes are going to mend anything? I didn't know things were like this. But you also never came back to find out." Tears ran down Benjamin's face. "Forgive me. It's not me you need to ask forgiveness from." Hazel took a deep breath. "My grandmother is inside, sick. The doctors say she doesn't have much time left. She barely recognizes people anymore. But you know what she never forgot? You. Every single day she asks if you've come back. Can I see her?" Hazel studied the man before her for a long moment. "Come," she finally said, turning toward the door. "But if you hurt her, you'll regret it. I don't care how much money you have." The inside of the shack was devastating. A single room served as everything. In the corner, on a makeshift bed, lay a figure so frail that Benjamin almost didn't recognize her. Miss Evie, consumed by illness, white hair, weathered skin. Breathing so weak he had to get closer to make sure she was still alive. "Grandma," Hazel called softly. "Visitor." Evelyn's eyes opened slowly. She looked at her granddaughter, then at the man, and for a moment there was no recognition. Then something sparkled in those tired eyes. "Benjamin, is that you, my boy?" He collapsed to his knees beside the bed, tears falling uncontrollably. "It's me, Miss Evie. I came back." I came back to pay my debt. A trembling hand rose to touch his face. I knew it. I knew you would come back. I told Helena, I told Hazel, my boy would come back. Forgive me for taking so long. There's nothing to forgive, son. You came. That's all that matters. Benjamin held that fragile hand and cried like he hadn't cried since he was a child. Drummond took everything from you, but I'm going to fix it. I promise. Miss Evie squeezed his hand with surprising strength. Listen well. That man has already taken a lot from a lot of people. He took your family, took my house, took the peace of this town. But there's one thing he'll never take. Hope. The hope I planted in you. She looked at Hazel. Promise me you'll take care of her, that you won't leave her alone. I promise. And promise me one more thing. Promise me you'll show this town that the boy they threw away became something none of them will ever be. Not for revenge, for justice. Benjamin looked at Miss Evie, then at Hazel, who was crying silently at the door. I promise, and this time I'm not leaving until I keep it. Outside the sun was setting over Willowbrook, and as night fell, Benjamin understood that the $47 were just the beginning. The true debt was much greater, but what he didn't yet know was that Harrison Drummond was also watching that sunset. And in the cruel old man's eyes a plan was forming. A plan to destroy Benjamin once and for all. And to do it, he was willing to reveal a secret kept for 20 years. A terrible secret about the true reason Benjamin's parents had died that night. Benjamin spent the night wide awake. Sitting on a plastic chair outside the shack, he watched the stars appear one by one in the sky over Willowbrook, the same sky he had gazed at as a boy when he dreamed of a different life. But back then, the stars seemed like promises. Now they felt like silent witnesses to everything he had lost. Hazel came out several times to check on her grandmother, casting suspicious glances in Benjamin's direction. They exchanged no words. The silence between them was heavy with questions neither had the courage to ask. When the first rays of sunlight painted the horizon orange, Benjamin finally stood up. His expensive clothes were wrinkled and covered in dust, but none of that mattered. You stayed out here all night? Hazel stood in the doorway, arms crossed, with dark circles that revealed she hadn't slept either. Couldn't sleep, he replied. My grandmother woke up asking for you, wants to know if you're still here. And you? Do you want me to leave? What I want doesn't matter. What matters is what my grandmother needs. And for some reason, I don't understand. She needs you. Benjamin nodded and walked toward the door, but Hazel blocked his path. Before you go in, I need to know something. What? My mother. Do you really remember her? Or is it just a name you heard yesterday and pretended to recognize? The question hurt more than any insult could. Benjamin closed his eyes for a moment, letting the memories flood his mind. Helena had a smile that could light up any room. She sang while helping your grandmother wash clothes, always the same old songs that Miss Evie taught her. She taught me to read using an old storybook someone threw in the trash, and when the other boys in town beat me up and called me a nobody, she was the one who cleaned my blood and told me that someday I'd be somebody important. When Benjamin opened his eyes, he saw that Hazel was crying silently. She talked about you, the young woman whispered, until the very end. She said you were the brother she chose to have. Said that one day you'd come back and everything would be okay. Forgive me for not coming back in time to see her. Hazel wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Come on, my grandmother is waiting. The inside of the shack seemed even sadder in the daylight. Cracks in the walls let in beams of sunlight that illuminated the dust floating in the air. In the corner, Miss Evie was awake, propped up on worn pillows, her eyes fixed on the door. My boy, she smiled when she saw him. I thought it had been a dream. Benjamin knelt beside the bed and held her hand. It wasn't a dream, Miss Evie. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. You were always stubborn, she laughed, but the laugh turned into a cough. Hazel rushed to get water, and Benjamin used the moment to study the face of the woman who had saved his life. The wrinkles told stories of decades of struggle and suffering. The eyes, once so alive, were now clouded and tired, but there was still a flame there, a strength that refused to go out. Miss Evie, he said softly, Drummond told me what he did, that he took your house because of a debt. The old woman's face darkened. That man is cruelty in human form. What debt was this? You never owed anyone anything. Miss Evie looked away, and for the first time, Benjamin saw something he had never seen in her. Shame. It was an old debt, son. A debt that wasn't mine, but that I carried anyway. What do you mean? Hazel returned with the water and helped her grandmother drink. When Miss Evie caught her breath, She looked at Benjamin with an expression he couldn't decipher. "Do you remember your parents, Benjamin?" The question caught him off guard. He remembered, yes. He remembered his strong father who worked on Drummond's farm from sunrise to sunset. He remembered his sweet mother who sang him to sleep. And he remembered the night everything ended. The night of the fire that took them both and left him alone in the world. "I remember," he answered, his voice choked. "I remember everything." "Then you remember your father worked for Harrison Drummond?" "Yes, and Drummond always treated him like he was less than an animal." Miss Evie took a deep breath as if gathering strength for what she was about to say. "My father was an honest man, Benjamin. The most honest I ever knew. That's exactly why he died." Benjamin's heart raced. "What do you mean?" "Weeks before the fire, your father came to my house in the middle of the night, nervous, scared. He'd discovered something terrible, documents proving Drummond had been stealing land from families for decades, forging deeds, bribing officials, threatening anyone who refused to sell. Your father found them hidden in the farm's office." Benjamin felt his blood run cold. "What happened?" "Your father wanted to report it, take the documents to the authorities in the city, but he needed money for the trip, to hire a lawyer, so he asked me for a loan." $47, Benjamin whispered, finally understanding. Back then it was worth more. But over the years, with the interest Drummond invented, it became a fortune I could never pay. Miss Evie squeezed Benjamin's hand. "Your father gave me the documents to keep safe. Said if anything happened to him, I should give them to someone trustworthy. And where are these documents now?" Miss Evie's eyes filled with tears. "A week later, your parents' house caught fire. Everyone said it was an accident. But I always knew the truth. Drummond killed my parents. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. And saying it out loud, Benjamin felt as if the world had finally revealed a truth that had always been there, hidden in the shadows. I could never prove it," Miss Evie continued, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "And the documents, I hid them in the only place I knew nobody would look." "Where?" Before Miss Evie could answer, the shack door burst open with a bang. 3 men walked in, and behind them, leaning on his cane, stood Harrison Drummond. "What a touching scene," the old man said with a cruel smile. "The reunion of the pathetic." Benjamin stood immediately, positioning himself between Drummond and Miss Evie's bed. "What are you doing here?" "This is still my property, boy. The old woman lives here because I allow it, and every permission has an expiration date." Drummond looked around with disgust. "I want this shack empty by end of week." "You can't do this!" Benjamin took a step forward. The 3 men positioned themselves, ready for confrontation. "Oh, but I can," Drummond smiled. "Unless you want to buy this piece of land." "How much?" "Let me think. About 500,000 ought to cover it." 500,000 for this lot? That's robbery." "It's not robbery. It's the price of my goodwill." Drummond approached Benjamin, and his voice dropped to a threatening whisper. "I know you got rich, boy. News already spread through the whole town, so the choice is yours. Pay what I want, or the old woman will be left with nowhere to go." Benjamin looked into the eyes of the man who had destroyed his family. He saw there the same cruelty, the same arrogance, the same contempt from 20 years ago, and he felt something growing inside him. Not rage, determination. "I'll pay." Drummond raised his eyebrows, surprised. "What?" "I'll pay the 500,000, but with one condition. You're not in a position to make demands." "Yes, I am. Because if I don't pay, you don't see the color of that money, and I know you need it. I saw the farm from the top of the hill. It's falling apart. Business isn't going well, is it, Drummond?" A vein bulged on the old man's forehead. "What do you want?" "The original deed for this lot, and the deed for the house Miss Evie lost. Everything documented, registered at the county clerk's office. That's worth a lot more than 500,000. "Then tell me your price." Drummond was silent for a moment, calculating. Then a slow smile spread across his face. 1 million. And you sign a document saying you'll never come after me or accuse me of anything. Done. "Benjamin, no." Miss Evie tried to sit up but was too weak. "Don't give money to that man. That's exactly what he wants." But Benjamin didn't move. "Do you trust me, Miss Evie?" The old woman looked at him with eyes full of tears and fear. "I trust you. Always have." "Then let me do this my way." He turned to Drummond. "Tomorrow, 10 o'clock, at the county clerk's office in town, bring all the documents. And Drummond—" "What?" "Enjoy that money, because it'll be the last you ever squeeze out of anyone in this life." Drummond let out a laugh. "Threats? From a boy who grew up eating garbage? You don't scare me, kid. Your father also thought he could stand up to me, and look where he ended up." The men laughed along with their boss, but Benjamin didn't flinch. "My father was a good man who wanted to do the right thing, and he paid with his life for it. But unlike him, I have something he didn't." "And what would that be?" Benjamin smiled for the first time since arriving in Willowbrook. "Money. A lot of money. And connections with people you don't even dream exist. So go prepare those documents, Drummond. And prepare yourself, too, because this story is far from over." The smile vanished from Drummond's face. For a brief instant, Benjamin saw something in the old man's eyes he had never seen before. Fear. But it was only an instant. Soon, the mask of arrogance returned. "Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Don't be late." He turned and left, followed by the 3 henchmen. The sound of their footsteps echoed through the shack until it faded into the distance. When they were finally alone, Hazel approached Benjamin. "Are you crazy? You're going to give $1 million to that monster?" "I am." "And then what? You think he's just going to leave us alone?" "No, I'm certain he won't. But that's exactly what I want." Hazel frowned. "I don't understand." Benjamin turned to Miss Evie, who was watching everything with a mixture of fear and hope. "Miss Evie, you said you hid my father's documents somewhere. I need to know where." The old woman hesitated. "Benjamin, those papers are dangerous. They already caused your parents' death. I don't want them to cause yours too. I'm not that scared little boy anymore, Miss Evie, and I promised I would bring justice. Not just for you, not just for me, but for everyone who suffered at that man's hands." Miss Evie was silent for a long time. Tears ran down her face, but there was also relief, as if she were finally freeing herself from a weight she had carried for decades. "The mulberry tree," she finally said, "in front of the house where I used to live. Your father and I buried a metal box under the roots the night before the fire. If nobody touched it, it should still be there." Benjamin felt his heart race. "The house Drummond took. The same one." He looked at Hazel. "Do you know where that house is?" "I do. It's been abandoned for years. Drummond never did anything with it. I need to go there, tonight when nobody's watching." Hazel crossed her arms. "If you think you're going alone, you're very wrong. I'm going with you. It's dangerous. Everything in life is dangerous, and that man destroyed my family just as much as yours. If there's a chance to make him pay, I want to be part of it." Benjamin looked at the young woman before him and saw something he recognized, the same determination he had when he left Willowbrook with $47 and a dream. "All right, we go together." Miss Evie held Benjamin's hand. "Be careful, son. Drummond is like a snake. When you think you're safe, that's when he strikes." "I know. But this time, the snake is going to find someone who knows how to bite back." Outside, the sun was high in the Willowbrook sky, and while Benjamin planned his next steps, he didn't know that Drummond was planning his too. And that very night, while he searched for secrets buried under the mulberry tree, someone would be watching. Someone with orders to make sure those documents never saw the light of day, no matter the cost. The moon was hidden behind clouds when Benjamin and Hazel left the shack. The town slept in silence, only the sound of crickets and the distant bark of a dog breaking the stillness. "This way," Hazel whispered, guiding him down a dirt path behind the houses. "If we go down the main road, someone might see us." Benjamin followed in silence, his expensive shoes sinking into the mud. With each step, childhood memories returned. How many times had he walked these same paths, fleeing from boys who wanted to beat him? How many times had he hidden in these same shadows, hungry and afraid? After several minutes, Hazel stopped abruptly. "Wait, what is it?" "There's someone up ahead." Benjamin narrowed his eyes, trying to see in the darkness. Indeed, there was a figure sitting on a fallen tree trunk, right in the middle of the path, a figure that seemed to be waiting for them. "You can come closer," a hoarse voice echoed in the night. "I know it's you. Been waiting for hours." Hazel let out a sigh of relief. "Uncle Silas, you nearly scared me to death." The old man stood up slowly, leaning on a gnarled wooden cane. Even in the dim light, Benjamin could see he was very elderly, with completely white hair and a face marked by decades of sun and hard work. But his eyes had a lively, alert gleam that belied his fragile appearance. "So this is the famous Benjamin," Uncle Silas said, studying him from head to toe. "The boy who became a legend in this town. You know me? Knew your parents. Worked with your father on Drummond's farm for many years." The old man paused. "And I was there the night they died." Benjamin's heart raced. "What do you know about that night?" Uncle Silas looked around, as if fearing the trees themselves might be listening. "I know a lot, son. Things I kept secret out of fear, out of shame, out of cowardice. But when I heard you'd come back, when I heard you were going to face Drummond, I decided it was time to talk." Hazel approached the old man. "Uncle Silas, what are you saying?" "I saw everything, girl. Saw when Drummond's men surrounded your parents' house. Saw when they threw kerosene on the walls. Saw when they lit the fire." Benjamin felt his legs weaken. He had to lean against a tree to keep from falling. "You saw and did nothing." His voice came out harsher than intended, but he couldn't control it. All the pain of a lifetime was overflowing. Uncle Silas lowered his head, and when he raised it again, there were tears in his old eyes. "I was hiding in the bushes, trembling with fear. There were 4 armed men, and I was just an ordinary worker. If I had tried something, I would have died with them." The old man's voice cracked. "But not a day goes by that I don't think about it. Not a night that I don't hear your mother's screams in my nightmares." Hazel placed her hand on Benjamin's shoulder, a silent gesture of support. "Uncle Silas," she said softly, "do you know who those men were?" "I do. 2 of them already died, but the other 2 are still alive. One is Colt, the one who takes care of the horses at the farm. The other—" he hesitated. "The other is Porter, Drummond's right-hand man, the same one who was at Miss Evie's shack this morning." Benjamin felt a chill run down his spine. One of the men who had killed his parents had been just feet away from him, and he didn't even know. "Why are you telling me this now?" Benjamin asked. "Because you're the only hope this town has. Drummond destroyed many families besides yours, son. Stole land, stole lives, stole dreams, and everyone here is too afraid to do anything." Uncle Silas took a step forward and gripped Benjamin's arm. "But you came back rich, came back strong, and if anyone can bring down that monster in human form, it's you. Would you testify against him? If I managed to take this to court, would you testify?" Uncle Silas took a deep breath. Fear was visible in his eyes, but there was also something else. Determination. "I will. I'm too old to be afraid of dying, and maybe this is the only way I can sleep in peace before I go." Benjamin looked at the man before him and saw there the reflection of all the residents of Willowbrook. Simple, hard-working people who had lived under a tyrant's yoke for decades. People who dreamed of freedom, but didn't have the strength to fight alone. "I'm going to bring Drummond down," Benjamin said, and his voice carried the weight of a sacred promise. "Not just for my parents, but for everyone who suffered at his hands. You have my word." Uncle Silas smiled, and for a moment he seemed younger. "I believe you, son. Your grandmother Evie always said you were special, that you had a different light, and she was never wrong about anyone." "She's not my blood grandmother," Benjamin corrected gently. "Blood doesn't make family, boy. Love does. And Evie loved you like a son from the first day she found you passed out from hunger on that corner." The words hit Benjamin hard. He had always known Miss Evie loved him, but hearing it from someone else, from someone who had witnessed everything from the outside, gave it a different weight. "Now go," Uncle Silas said, pointing toward the direction of Miss Evie's old house. "Do what you need to do, but be careful. Drummond has eyes everywhere." Benjamin and Hazel continued on their way, leaving the old man behind. Benjamin's heart was heavy with the revelations, but there was also a flame of hope. Now he had a witness, someone who could confirm what his parents had suffered. Miss Evie's old house appeared at the end of the street, hidden among trees that had grown wildly over the years. The building was in ruins, with the roof partially collapsed and the walls overtaken by vines. But in front, majestic and stubborn, the mulberry tree was still standing. "That's it," Hazel pointed. "The tree my grandmother always talked about." They approached in silence. Benjamin took off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. He hadn't brought tools, but that wasn't going to stop him. "We need to dig," he said. "Miss Evie said it's under the roots." Hazel looked around and found a sharp rock and a piece of wood that could serve as an improvised shovel. "We'll have to do this the hard way." The 2 began to dig, taking turns when one got tired. The earth was hard, compacted by years of not being touched. Benjamin felt his hands ache, his fingers get scraped, but he didn't stop. Each handful of dirt removed was a step closer to the truth. After what seemed like an eternity, the wood struck something metallic. "Found it!" Hazel exclaimed, keeping her voice down to avoid making noise. Working together, they unearthed a rusted metal box the size of a shoebox. Benjamin's heart was beating so hard, he was certain it could be heard for miles. With trembling hands, he opened the lid. Inside, protected by a plastic bag that had withstood time, were dozens of yellowed documents, land deeds, Signed contracts, photographs, letters, and on top of everything, a handwritten letter that made Benjamin's blood freeze. It was his father's handwriting. "My son," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means something bad happened to me and your mother. But don't cry for us. Cry for the injustices that haven't been corrected yet." Benjamin couldn't continue reading. Tears blurred his vision, and a sob escaped from his chest. Hazel approached and placed her hand on his shoulder, letting him cry. "He knew," Benjamin murmured between tears. "He knew he was going to die and still didn't run. Why?" "Maybe because running would mean abandoning everything he believed in," Hazel said softly. "Maybe because he wanted the truth to survive, even if he didn't survive." Benjamin looked at the young woman beside him and noticed something he hadn't noticed before. She was strong, much stronger than she appeared. She had grown up in poverty, lost her mother early, cared for her sick grandmother alone. And yet she was here in the middle of the night, helping a man she had just met dig up ghosts from the past. "Thank you," he said, "for being here with me. Don't thank me yet, we still need to get out of here without being seen." As if her words had been a prophecy, the sound of footsteps broke the silence of the night. "There, someone's at the mulberry tree." Benjamin and Hazel turned and saw 3 figures emerging from the darkness. Flashlights turned on, momentarily blinding them. "Well, well," a familiar voice said. "The little mouse came to get the cheese." It was Porter, Drummond's right-hand man, the man who, according to Uncle Silas, had helped kill his parents. "Run!" Hazel shouted. She grabbed the metal box and took off running in the opposite direction. Benjamin hesitated for a second, staring into Porter's eyes. "This isn't over," he said. "Oh, yes, it is, boy. Same way it ended with your father." Benjamin felt rage explode inside him, but Hazel's hand pulled him. "Come on now!" They ran through the darkness, dodging trees, jumping fences, tripping over roots. Behind them, the men shouted and cursed, but they were falling behind. After running what seemed like an eternity, Benjamin and Hazel finally stopped in a safe place, hidden behind an abandoned chapel on the outskirts of town. "They didn't follow us," Hazel gasped. "I think they gave up." Benjamin looked at the box she still held against her chest. "You saved the documents. I saved the truth. That's different." He looked at her with an admiration he didn't try to hide. "You're very brave, you know that." "I'm not brave, I'm just tired of being afraid." They stayed there for some time, catching their breath, processing everything that had happened. Benjamin took his father's letter, and in the faint light of the moon that had finally appeared between the clouds, continued to read. "In this box are all the proofs you'll need to destroy Harrison Drummond. Forged deeds, fraudulent contracts, and the names of all the public officials he bribed over the years. Use this wisely, my son. Don't let anger blind you. Justice is more powerful than revenge." The last words of the letter made Benjamin sob. "I love you, son, and wherever I am, I'll be watching over you. Your father, Thomas Ashford." Thomas. It was the first time in 20 years that Benjamin had read his father's name. And there, hidden behind an abandoned chapel, holding a box full of secrets, he made a new promise. "I will bring justice, Dad. For your memory, for Mom's memory, for everyone who suffered. I promise." Hazel placed her hand over his. "And you won't do it alone." When the first rays of sun began to appear on the horizon, Benjamin and Hazel returned to the shack. Miss Evie was awake, waiting for them with an anxious look. "Did you find it?" Benjamin placed the box on the table and opened it. "We did, and it's much worse than you imagined." Miss Evie looked at the documents, then at Benjamin, and tears began to stream down her aged face. "Your father would be so proud of you, son. I haven't done anything yet. You came back. That's already everything." Benjamin knelt beside the bed and held the hand of the woman who had saved his life. "Today I'm going to the clerk's office to pay Drummond, but that's just the beginning. Now I have the weapons I need to truly destroy him." Miss Evie smiled, but there was worry in her eyes. "Drummond is dangerous, Benjamin. When he finds out you have these documents, he'll do everything to silence you, exactly like he did with your father." "I know, but this time he's not dealing with a rural worker alone and without resources. He's dealing with me, and I have much more to lose than he does." "What do you mean?" Benjamin looked at Hazel, then at Miss Evie, and his voice became choked. "I spent 20 years building an empire of money, but I never built a family, never had people who truly loved me." He squeezed Miss Evie's hand. "Until now, and I won't let anyone take this from me, never again." Outside, the sun rose over Willowbrook, bringing a new day full of uncertainties and dangers, but also bringing something that town hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The county clerk's office was an hour from Willowbrook, in an old building with yellowed walls that seemed to carry the weight of decades of secrets and lies. Benjamin arrived punctually at 10 in the morning, as agreed, but he didn't come alone. Beside him, wearing an impeccable suit, stood Mr. Felix Crawford, one of the most respected attorneys in the country. Benjamin had called him at dawn, explaining the situation, and the lawyer caught the first available flight. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Mr. Crawford asked as they climbed the courthouse steps. "Paying $1 million to this man is practically admitting he has power over you." "That's exactly what I want him to think," Benjamin replied. "The more confident he is, the more careless he'll become." Harrison Drummond was already waiting inside, accompanied by Porter and a nervous-looking attorney who was sweating despite the air conditioning. When he saw Benjamin enter with Mr. Crawford, Drummond frowned. "Brought reinforcements, boy?" "Brought my lawyer. Business this big requires professionalism." The clerk, a short man with thick glasses named Mr. Wallace, cleared his throat nervously. "Gentlemen, shall we begin?" The transaction was tense and silent. Benjamin signed the papers, transferred the money, and in return received the deeds to the lot where the shack stood and to Miss Evie's old house. Drummond smiled the entire time, like a cat that had just cornered a mouse. "Pleasure doing business with you, Benjamin," the old man said, tucking the transfer receipt into his pocket. "I hope this settles any matters between us." "Almost," Benjamin replied calmly. "What do you mean, almost?" Benjamin turned to Mr. Crawford, who opened a folder and pulled out a stack of documents. "Mr. Harrison Drummond, my client would like to inform you that he is filing a lawsuit against you for document fraud, unlawful appropriation of lands, bribery of public officials, and—" Mr. Crawford paused dramatically. "First-degree murder." The smile disappeared from Drummond's face as if it had been erased by a sponge. "What did you say?" "You heard me clearly." Benjamin took a step forward and his voice was cold as steel. "I know what you did to my parents. I know you ordered them to set fire to their house, and I have proof." Drummond's face turned red with fury. "That's a lie. Slander. I'll sue you for defamation." "Go ahead and try. But it's going to be hard to defend yourself when the district attorney has access to this." Mr. Crawford placed on the clerk's desk a copy of the documents Benjamin had found in the metal box: forged deeds, fraudulent contracts, lists of bribes paid to officials over decades. "Furthermore," Benjamin continued, "I have an eyewitness who saw your men surround my parents' house and set it on fire. A witness who is willing to testify in court. Porter, who until then had remained silent, visibly paled." "Boss," he began. "Shut up," the old man roared. Mr. Wallace, the clerk, was staring at the documents with wide eyes. His hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. This is very serious," he murmured. "My God, decades of crimes." "It's all lies." Drummond slammed his cane on the floor. "This boy fabricated this evidence to get revenge on me." "The evidence is original," Mr. Crawford said calmly. "They've already been examined, and some of them have your own signature." Drummond's attorney stood up abruptly. "Mr. Drummond, I can't represent you in this. This goes far beyond land disputes." "You coward," Drummond spat. "I paid fortunes for you to defend me." "There's no defense for murder, Mr. Drummond." The man grabbed his briefcase and left the clerk's office almost running, leaving Drummond alone with Porter. Benjamin approached the old man, and for the first time since arriving in Willowbrook, he let all the pain and rage he had carried for 20 years show through in his voice. "You destroyed my family. You turned me into an orphan. You made me grow up eating scraps from the garbage, sleeping under bridges, being humiliated by people who weren't worth even the sole of my father's shoe." His voice trembled, but he didn't stop. "But you made a mistake. You left me alive. And I spent 20 years getting strong enough to come back and do what my father couldn't." Drummond stared at him with a hatred that seemed capable of setting the air between them on fire. "You don't know who you're dealing with, boy. I have powerful friends. Judges, politicians, people who can make you disappear with a snap of their fingers. Your friends are going to abandon you when they see the size of the scandal coming. Nobody wants to sink with a rotten ship. You'll regret this. You'll regret ever coming back to this miserable town." Benjamin smiled, and there was deep sadness in that smile. "I regret a lot of things, Drummond. I regret not coming back sooner. I regret not being here when Helena died, when Miss Evie lost everything. But one thing I don't regret, having the opportunity to look into your eyes and say that you're never going to hurt anyone again." Drummond turned and stormed out of the clerk's office, slamming the door so hard the glass cracked. Porter followed him like a frightened dog. When they were finally alone, Mr. Wallace approached Benjamin with tears in his eyes. "Young man, you don't know the good you're doing. Drummond destroyed my family too. Took my father's lands many years ago. My father died of heartbreak, never being able to prove anything." Benjamin placed his hand on the clerk's shoulder. "How many families did he destroy?" "Dozens, maybe hundreds. Nobody ever had the courage to stand up to him." "Well, now someone does, and I promise I won't stop until each of those families receives justice." The ride back to Willowbrook was silent. Benjamin stared out the car window, watching the scenery pass without really seeing it. His mind was somewhere else, in another time. He remembered his father, a tall, strong man with calloused hands from work and a heart full of dreams. He remembered his mother, always singing while she cooked, always finding reasons to smile even on the hardest days. And he remembered the last night he saw them, when they said goodbye without knowing it was a farewell. "Are you all right?" Mr. Crawford asked. "No, but I will be." When they arrived at the town, Benjamin noticed something was wrong. People were running through the streets, shouting, pointing somewhere. "What's happening?" he asked the driver. Before anyone could answer, Hazel appeared running toward the car, her face drenched in tears. "Benjamin, thank God you're here!" He jumped out of the car before it even fully stopped. "What happened? What's going on?" "It's my grandmother. She got much worse. The doctor said that... Hazel couldn't finish. She collapsed in sobs, and Benjamin held her for a moment before running toward the shack. When he arrived, he found Uncle Silas standing at the door with his hat in his hands and his eyes red. The old man slowly shook his head. "She's waiting for you, son, but not for much longer." Benjamin entered and found Miss Evie lying in bed, paler and frailer than ever. A doctor in a white coat was beside her, putting away his instruments with a defeated expression. "I did everything I could," the doctor said quietly. "Now it's just a matter of time." Benjamin approached the bed and knelt down. Tears were already streaming down his face when he took Miss Evie's hand. "I'm here. I came back." Her eyes opened slowly, and a weak smile appeared on her lips. "My boy, did you succeed?" "I did. Drummond is going to pay for everything he did. For my parents, for you, for all the families he destroyed." "Good," she whispered. "Your father would be so proud. You need to get better to see it. You need to get better to live in the new house I'm going to build for you." Miss Evie raised a trembling hand and touched Benjamin's face. "I don't need a new house, son. I need to know that you'll be all right, that you'll take care of Hazel, that you'll be happy." "Miss Evie, please, listen," she interrupted him with surprising strength in her voice. "I lived a long and hard life. I lost my husband early, raised my daughter alone, lost my daughter too. But you know what kept me alive all these years?" Benjamin shook his head, unable to speak. "The hope of seeing you come back. Of knowing that the boy I saved from that corner had made it in life. And you came back, son. You came back and showed me that all the sacrifice was worth it." Hazel entered the shack and knelt on the other side of the bed, holding her grandmother's other hand. "Grandma, don't talk like that. You're going to get better." "I won't, my granddaughter. And it's okay. I've already lived everything I needed to live. Already seen everything I needed to see." She looked from Benjamin to Hazel. "You two are my family now. Take care of each other. It's the only thing I ask." "I promise," Benjamin said, his voice choked. "I promise too," Hazel completed. Miss Evie smiled, and for a moment her eyes shone with the same light they had when Benjamin was a boy. "You know what I most wanted to see before I go?" "What?" "I wanted to see you truly happy, Benjamin. Not happy because you have money, not happy because you defeated Drummond, happy because you found a place to call home." Benjamin squeezed her hand tighter. "I found it. It's here, with you, with Hazel, with these simple people who never forgot me. Then I can go in peace." "No, not yet. Please." Miss Evie closed her eyes and her breathing became slower, softer. "Tell me a story, Benjamin, like I used to tell you when you were little." Tears fell uncontrollably down Benjamin's face, but he took a deep breath and began to speak. "Once upon a time, there was a boy who had nothing. No family, no home, no hope. He thought the world was cruel and that he would never be anybody. But one day he met a woman who had a heart bigger than the world. She gave him food when he was hungry, shelter when he was cold, and love when he thought nobody would ever love him." Miss Evie smiled, eyes still closed. "And what happened to that boy? He grew up. He faced 1,000 hardships, but he never forgot what that woman had done for him. And when he finally succeeded in life, He came back. He came back to thank her, to pay a debt that had no price. And he discovered that the greatest wealth that existed wasn't money. It was the love that woman had planted in his heart. And how does the story end? Benjamin looked at Hazel, who was crying silently. He looked at Uncle Silas standing at the door. He looked at the woman who had saved his life. The story doesn't end, because love never ends. It passes from one person to another, from one generation to another. And as long as there's someone to remember, that woman will live forever. Miss Evie opened her eyes one last time, and they were full of peace. What a beautiful story, son. It's our story, Miss Evie. The story you wrote when you decided to save a boy nobody wanted. I love you, Benjamin, always have. Since the first day. I love you too, more than any words can say. Miss Evie smiled one last time. She squeezed Benjamin's hand and Hazel's hand, and then gently, like someone falling asleep after a long day of work, she was gone. The shack fell silent. Outside, the sun was beginning to set over Willowbrook, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. And as night fell, Benjamin remained kneeling beside the bed, holding the hand of the woman who had been his heart's mother, the woman who had saved his life, the woman who had proved that love is stronger than any adversity. And in that moment, he made one last silent promise, that he would honor her memory every day of his life, that he would take care of Hazel as Miss Evie had taken care of him, and that he would transform Willowbrook into the prosperous and just place she had always dreamed of, because that was what she deserved, and that was what love demanded. Miss Evie's funeral was the largest Willowbrook had ever seen. People came from every corner of the town and surrounding areas to say goodbye to the woman who, for decades, had been the kind heart of that community. People she had helped with a plate of food, with a word of comfort, with a loan she never asked to be repaid. People who, like Benjamin, owed her far more than money could ever pay. The small church was packed, and many had to follow the ceremony from outside, under the warm morning sun. Benjamin sat in the front row beside Hazel, who hadn't let go of his hand since they left the shack. Father Mitchell, a grey-haired man with a gentle voice, led the service with words that seemed written especially for Miss Evie. Evelyn Sunderland was not a woman of great possessions. She had no lands, no money, no power, but she had something many wealthy people will never have, a heart that knew no limits when it came to love. Benjamin felt tears streaming down his face, but he didn't wipe them away. Crying for Miss Evie wasn't shame, it was honor. When the time came to speak, Benjamin stood up on trembling legs. He walked to the altar and looked at the sea of faces before him. He saw Uncle Silas in the third row, tears in his eyes. He saw Mr. Wallace, the clerk who had closed the office to be there. He saw dozens of people he didn't know, but who had been touched by Miss Evie's kindness. "I arrived in Willowbrook just a few days ago," he began, his voice choked. "But the truth is I never really left. A part of me was always here, with the woman who lies in this casket." The church was in absolute silence. "When I was 12, I was a boy with nothing. No family, no home, no future. The world had thrown me away, until Miss Evie found me passed out from hunger on a street corner. She took me home, fed me, gave me shelter, and when I asked why she was doing that for a stranger, she said something I never forgot." Benjamin closed his eyes for a moment. She said, "Nobody is a stranger, son. Everyone is family, we just haven't met yet." A collective sob ran through the church. Miss Evie gave $47 to a boy who had nothing and told him to chase his dreams. "I promised I would come back to repay that debt. And I discovered that this is a debt you don't pay with money. You pay it by living the way she lived, by loving the way she loved." He looked at the congregation. "Willowbrook is going to change. It will become the place Miss Evie always dreamed of, a place of hope and justice. And to those who thought they could destroy families without consequences, the time of impunity is over." The news of Harrison Drummond's arrest spread across the country. The documents Benjamin had found, combined with Uncle Silas's testimony and other victims who finally had the courage to speak, were devastating. Decades of crimes came to light: fraud, theft, bribery, and the murder of Benjamin's parents. Porter was arrested in the same operation, crying and begging for clemency. Colt tried to flee but was captured at the state border. All three awaited trial, and the lawyers said the sentences would be long. But for Benjamin, the true victory wasn't in the newspaper headlines. It was in the streets of Willowbrook. With the money he had accumulated over 20 years of work, he began to transform the town. He hired engineers and architects, but employed local residents in all the construction. The dirt streets were paved. The school got new computers and books. The health clinic now operated every day with a complete staff. The old water tower was repaired. For the first time in years, every home had clean running water. In Miss Evie's old house, Benjamin built a community centre. On the facade, a bronze plaque read, Evelyn Sunderland Centre, where nobody is a stranger. Inside, there were rooms for classes, a small library, and a kitchen where volunteers served meals to anyone in need, just as Miss Evie had done her entire life. And beneath the mulberry tree, in the same spot where he had unearthed the metal box, Benjamin planted a garden in memory of his parents. On a sunny afternoon, weeks after the inauguration, Benjamin was sitting on a bench in the square when Hazel approached. "You changed this place," she said. "My grandmother would be so happy. I just gave people the tools to change their own lives." Hazel smiled. "You're just like her, never accepting credit." "Hazel, I need to ask you something. Do you plan to stay here? This is my home, my roots, my memories. I can't imagine myself anywhere else." "And college? Didn't you want to study medicine?" Hazel's eyes widened. "How do you know that?" "Miss Evie told me." Benjamin took an envelope from his pocket and handed it to her. Inside was an acceptance letter from the state's medical school, along with a receipt for paid tuition. "Benjamin, you're going to study medicine. And when you graduate, you're going to come back and be Willowbrook's doctor. Continue your grandmother's legacy." Tears fell down Hazel's face. "I can't accept this. It's too much. This isn't a gift. It's an investment in this town's future, and you're the most important part of that future." Hazel threw herself into Benjamin's arms. "Thank you for everything. Thank your grandmother. She taught me that we're only truly rich when we help others grow." In the weeks that followed, the families whose lands Drummond had stolen began receiving their properties back. Mr. Crawford worked pro bono to ensure justice was served. One by one, the forged deeds were annulled and the rightful owners restored. Uncle Silas became something of a local hero. At 83 years old, he said he had finally found peace. "I can die now knowing I did the right thing," he told Benjamin. "This town still needs you, Uncle Silas. This town needs you, son. You're the one who brought hope back." Years passed. Willowbrook transformed into an example of sustainable development, visited by researchers and politicians who wanted to understand how a forgotten town had become a model of prosperity. The answer was simple, but few could truly comprehend it. Love. Investment in people, not things. Community, not competition. The same principles Miss Evie had lived by her entire life, now woven into the very fabric of the town. Hazel graduated from medical school with honors and returned home as she had promised. She opened a clinic in the community center that bore her grandmother's name and never charged a penny from those who couldn't pay. She married a kind teacher from the new school and had 2 children, the eldest named Thomas after Benjamin's father, and the youngest named Evelyn after the woman who had started it all. Benjamin divided his time between business in the capital and Willowbrook, but his heart always knew where his true home was. He never married, never had biological children, but became a father and grandfather to dozens of children who passed through the community center. And every time someone asked the secret of his success, he gave the same answer: $47 and a woman who believed in me when nobody else did. Harrison Drummond died in prison, alone and forgotten, just as he had made so many others feel during his lifetime. Porter and Colt served their sentences in full. Justice, though late, had been complete. On an ordinary afternoon, many years later, Benjamin was sitting beneath the mulberry tree when a little girl approached. She must have been 7 or 8 years old, with scraped knees and a dress dirty with earth. "Mister, are you Benjamin?" "I am. And what's your name?" "Evelyn. My mom gave me that name because of a very good woman who helped her family." Benjamin felt his eyes fill with tears. "That's a very beautiful name. My mom said this woman saved a lot of people, and that you were her son." "I was. Son of the heart." The girl smiled. "Can you tell me about her?" Benjamin looked at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. "Of course I can. Sit here beside me." The girl sat down, and Benjamin began to tell the story of Miss Evie. The story of a simple woman who changed the world with love. The story of $47 that were worth more than millions. The story of a debt that would never be fully paid, because true love has no end. And as his voice echoed through the evening in Willowbrook, Benjamin knew that Miss Evie was smiling somewhere, because her legacy lived on, from heart to heart, forever. That night, Benjamin walked to the cemetery one last time. The moon was full, casting silver light over the peaceful grounds. He knelt before the 3 headstones, his father, his mother, and Miss Evie, and spoke softly into the night. I kept every promise, every single one. The town is thriving. Hazel became a wonderful doctor. You'd be so proud of her, Miss Evie. The children of Willowbrook have futures now. They have schools and dreams and people who believe in them. And your story is told every day to anyone who will listen. He placed fresh flowers on each grave. I used to think that $47 was a debt I needed to repay. But I understand now. It was never about the money, it was about the love behind it, and that love, it multiplied. It spread through this whole town, through every life we touched together. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves above him. I'm not the scared little boy who ran away anymore. I'm not even the angry man who came back for revenge. I'm something better now. Something you helped me become. Benjamin stood and looked at the stars. Thank you. For believing in a boy nobody wanted. For giving me a chance when the world gave up on me. For teaching me that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about showing up. It's about love. He smiled through his tears. I love you all. And I'll keep making you proud. Every single day. Until we meet again. As Benjamin walked back through the streets of Willowbrook, he passed the community center with its lights still glowing warm, the new school, the clinic where Hazel was probably still working late helping someone in need. He saw the paved roads, the streetlights, the children's playground. He saw everything that had grown from one simple act of kindness decades ago. And he understood, finally and completely, what Miss Evie had known all along, that love is the only currency that multiplies when you give it away. That hope is a seed that can grow into a forest. That one person, with enough courage and compassion, can change the entire world. Benjamin Ashford had returned to Willowbrook to pay a debt of $47. He left having paid it forward 1,000,000 times over. And the story of the boy who promised to return when he was rich and came back a millionaire only to discover that true wealth was something money could never buy, would be told in that town for generations to come. A reminder that kindness matters, that promises should be kept, that love above all else is the greatest legacy anyone can leave behind, and that sometimes the poorest boy in town can become the richest man in the world, not because of what he earned, but because of what he gave. CTA Final. This story reminded us that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in the lives we touch. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and tell us in the comments, who is the Miss Evie in your life?